Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this Bible class on this Sunday morning. I hope that you are doing well. Thank you so much for making the commitment to keep up with this class. I know it would be easy to fit it in somewhere else or to just let it go by the wayside, but I appreciate you sticking with us as we go through these series of lessons through the book of Deuteronomy. We're going to be in Deuteronomy chapter 13 this morning, Deuteronomy chapter 13. If you want to go ahead and turn in your Bible there, or on your tablet, or on your phone, we're going to look at a couple of verses from here in Deuteronomy chapter 13. Just as a reminder, we have entitled this series of going through the book of Deuteronomy as renewing our spiritual life. It's real easy to get into a rut. It's real easy to get into the habit of just simply going through the motions. But we want a faith that is genuine, that's passionate, that is authentic, a faith that will carry us and empower us, as the New Testament says, to walk by faith and to not walk by sight. So we thought that Deuteronomy would be a good study for us to renew that spiritual life, to renew that commitment to God and to His way. So Moses is talking to a new generation of Israelites. They are on the cusp, on the edge of crossing over the Jordan into the Promised Land. So Moses is providing different lessons and different sermons or speeches to try to invigorate this new generation, to warn them that they will experience the same pitfalls and temptations that the previous generation had, but also giving them tips, giving them safeguards, things that will help them to not fall prey to that. And I hope that those things are serving well for us and our faith too. So Deuteronomy chapter 13 is where we are. And if I could put it in a way to describe this chapter, Deuteronomy chapter 13 serves as a case study. Now, you notice throughout the majority of the chapters we have looked at, chapters 1 through 12, that it seems to be that Moses will find a way, one way or the other, to include a discussion, a mention about idolatry. And chapter 13 is no different, but he approaches it from a different angle. It serves as a case study. Read with me Deuteronomy 13 verses 1 and 2. If a prophet or a dreamer of dreams arises among you and gives you a sign or a wonder, that would be something that we would know as a miracle, and the sign or the wonder that he tells you comes to pass, and if he says, let us go after other gods, and you'll notice that phrase is in quotation marks, which you have not known, and let us serve them, you shall not listen to the words of that prophet or the dreamer of the dreams. For the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. So what this chapter serves as a case study, not just with idolatry, but a supporter of the idolatry. What happens if there is a dreamer, if there is a false prophet, if there is an individual that comes and arises from one of the families, one of the tribes, and he gives a sign, he gives a wonder, a miracle, by telling or making a prediction or doing something else, and it actually comes true. Moses says it's possible that it happens and that it comes true. But then he gives two phrases in quotation marks at the end of verse 1 and in verse 2. That prophet whose miracle did come true, that wonder, that sign did come true, says, let's go after other gods. Let's go find another idol, or let's go pursue this god, or let's go pursue that god. And also, let us serve them. So it's not just to pursue them and to find them, but also to serve them. Then this case study tells us that if that individual arises, does that miracle, and gives these statements, then that individual is not to be followed. That individual is not to be part of it. So in verses 1, verse 3, and verse 5, Moses speaks of these false prophets and dreamers. So again, chapter 13, verse 1, if a prophet or a dreamer of dreams. Then verse 3, he mentions the same thing, the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams. And then you skip down to verse 5. Notice that prophet or that dreamer of dreams. Either way, each one leads into that, and Moses is making sure these are the specifics. This false prophet, this dreamer of dreams. But verse 5 tells us what Israel was supposed to do. That prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death, because he has taught rebellion against the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and redeemed you out of the house of slavery, to make you leave the way in which the Lord your God commanded you to walk. So you shall purge the evil from your midst. That's a strict statement. It's a strict response given by God through Moses to this new generation of Israelites. This prophet arises, provides a sign, provides a miracle. It actually comes true, but then he says, let's go pursue this idol. Let's serve this idol. Let's serve this false god. And the Lord, Yahweh, comes and says, this is what you do. You find them and you destroy them. You put them to death. And there's a couple of reasons in verse 5. One is because he has taught rebellion. We're reminded that idolatry and the pursuit of a false god and the pursuit of idols is a rebellion. Rebellion was there from the very beginning. We know that Adam and Eve, when God gave the command to not touch the tree, they had access to everything else. They rebelled by not following what God said. We think and put into terms rebellion when it comes to our kids being little. Maybe they're rebellious. Maybe it's a little kid, a little boy, a little girl that just seems to just do the opposite of what mom and dad want. And we know that rebellious streak. You know it's possible in our own life for us to live in rebellion. Now we could use disobedience and rebellion to be synonymous and talk about the same thing. But disobedience kind of takes the sting out of it. If we live contrary to God, and if we follow other things other than God, we are repeating the sin of rebellion. If there is something that described Israel besides being stiff-necked or hard-hearted, is that she was a rebellious people. She found a way to rebel in a lot of different ways. She rebelled when she built the golden calf. She as a nation rebelled when she refused to enter the promised land, with Joshua and Caleb speaking positive things, but the other 10 spies speaking negative things. God considered that to be rebellion. And then if they were to pursue an idol or a false god and to serve that idol, then God also considered that to be rebellion. God doesn't like rebellion. Maybe one of the things that we need to do in renewing our spiritual life is maybe to a certain extent look to see where we have been rebellious. Where have we been going against God on purpose? Where have we know this is what God teaches, we know this is what God desires, but our heart, our mind, our life, our words, our actions, they are actually causing us to be rebellious. God says to put those individuals to death. Maybe we need to put the rebellious spirit in us to death. But he goes on. He says the other reason why this is such a grievous thing and why this law is so strict in putting them to death, because it also goes against God himself. And this isn't just any God. Notice the reminder that Moses gives about Yahweh, that he is the God who brought them out of the land of Egypt, brought them out of a land of idolatry. The other reason is that you see on the screen, and that is because it would lead people away from God. God has done so much to lead people to him. He has given his word. He has, in the Old Testament times, he gave his miracles. He did all sorts of things to open the eyes of people and the hearts of people so that they would come and find him, so that they would come and seek him. Somebody who would point to another God who, with their life or their words or their actions, is actually leading people away. It's undoing what God wants. Here's something specific about these false prophets and dreamers, and this is something that Moses mentions, and I'd like to read these verses if you will read along with me, and that is verses 6 through 11. Now, we can wrap our minds around a false prophet if it's someone that's just kind of over there, and maybe it's an acquaintance, maybe we've known them from a distance. What do you do if the false prophet comes from a family? What if you do if the dreamer comes from the family? Notice what God is going to say. If your brother, the son of your mother, or the son, or your daughter, or the wife you embrace, or your friend, who is as your own soul, entices you secretly, saying, let us go serve other gods, which neither you nor your fathers have known, some of the gods of the peoples who are around you, whether near or far off from you, from one end of the earth to the other, you shall not yield to him or listen to him, nor shall your eye pity him, nor shall you spare him, nor shall you conceal him, but you shall kill him. Your hand shall be first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. You shall stone him to death with stones, because he sought to draw you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. And all Israel shall hear and fear, and never again do such wickedness as this among you. That's a tough passage, isn't it? I got to be honest with you, that's one that when I was reading in preparation for the study, in preparation for the class, why would Moses bring in the aspect of our family? Why would he bring in the aspect of a son or a daughter or a wife or a husband? Why would he talk about immediate family members? Why would he be so specific to all of this? I think there's several reasons. I think one, as you see on the screen, I think it reiterates the importance of Deuteronomy 6 verses 4 through 7. What should be happening in a family is that they should be teaching what Jesus would refer to as the greatest command, to love God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your strength. We remember, and this is going back to Deuteronomy 6, that lesson that a lot of these things were safeguards for the family, that they were safeguards for the spirituality and the life and the overall spiritual health of the family. Remember, to a certain extent, the health of the nation depended on the health of families. And we're kind of seeing that even in our own country, that the health of our nation has deteriorated to a certain extent because the family, for numerous years, for decades, has deteriorated too. Well, the same can be true of a church. The health of a church, to a certain extent, depends on the health of the family. This is why Moses made it so clear and abundantly clear in Deuteronomy 6 verses 4 through 7 that this is what you do. You hear, O Israel, that the Lord your God is one. There isn't multiple gods. There are not multiple gods to pursue or to chase after. Instead, you are to love this one God with all of your heart and soul and mind and strength. The false prophet could come from the family because this individual, this son or this daughter, this wife or this husband, they may have forgotten or never knew the most important command of them all. Now, we see some of this playing out throughout both Testaments. If you think about individuals who did things that took them away, for instance, going back even before the law was given, who was it that caused Israel to stumble with the golden calf in the book of Exodus? We forget, we think, it was Aaron the high priest. It was also Aaron, the brother of Moses. Do you think that this statement that Moses gives, that it hits home to him? I wonder if Moses, when he's if he's stating these words that God is giving him to state to this new generation, as he says, if your brother, and then maybe he pauses for just a moment and says, you know what, that can happen because it happened to my brother. My brother did this. Something that we have to be careful with on our own selves today is to think that our families couldn't do something like this as well. Now, I'm going to be very careful and tread this ground very carefully as well. I understand that. Don't want you to think that I'm going to put your family or my family or any other family under the microscope and to judge them. The point that Moses is making is that this sin, this rebellion that could lead somebody away from God to an idol can come from any place. We'll see Jesus speak about family on several occasions. For instance, did you know that Jesus will talk when he is out speaking to a crowd, and so group will be coming. So just imagine Jesus is right here, he's talking to a crowd, And a group comes over from the side and says, "Hey, Master, your mother and your brothers, your sister, they're looking for you." On several occasions, Jesus will look at those who said that, and then he'll look at the crowd and said, "Let me tell you that the ones who do the will of my Father, that they are my family. They are my mother and my brother and my sister." In another place in Matthew 10, Jesus speaks of bringing a sword. That's a hard saying of Jesus, where it would divide family, mother and daughter and father and son. Why? Because people would disagree about Jesus. Maybe your own family is in a place like that. One of the things that I'd encourage as much as possible, and we've been hinting at this and going at this for several chapters on numerous occasions, I cannot stress enough for those of us that have families how much we need to guard the spiritual health of our family. To make sure that our children know that there is one God, that we are to love Him and serve Him faithfully, and most importantly, to love Him and to serve Him only. Now, as we bring this to a close, there's a couple of things I'd like to mention from the New Testament perspective. You know that false prophets can still exist today. You know, sometimes we think that these things, maybe they were just regulated to the Old Testament, something that we don't have to worry about. But I think we can take a survey of Christendom as a whole, and we can see that there's a lot of differences. Because somewhere along the way, somebody started teaching something different. We can't just assume that if someone wears the name Christian, that they're going to teach what is right and do what is right. I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't mind having that assumption, but we can't make that. We cannot assume that somebody who says that they wear that name and even go to a church is going to teach and do what is right. Notice what John is going to tell the church that he's writing to in 1 John 4, verses 1 through 6. "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. For many false prophets have gone out into the world." Now, notice what John is going to do. We're going to work our way through this very quickly, but I wanted to point out some things. So he's laid it out. Many false prophets have gone into the world. Our first thing is not to believe, but instead to test. Put them to the test. And by the way, when you put them to the test, Moses says you put them to the test by the message they give. We put every spirit to the test by the word that God has given. If you don't know what's taught in here, or if I don't know what's taught in here, how do I know what to test? How do I know what to hear for, to look for? Again, shameless plug, know your Bible. Read it every day. Have it ingrained within your heart. So if false prophets have gone out into the world, don't believe them, instead test them. And then this is what he says. Notice in verse 2, "By this you will know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. And every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard was coming and is now in the world already. Little children, you are from God and have overcome them. For he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. They," who are the they? They goes back to the false prophets. "They are from the world, therefore they speak from the world, and the world listens to them. We," who are the we? That would be the apostles. "We are from God. Whoever knows God listens to us. Whoever is not from God does not listen to us. By this we know the spirit of truth and the spirit of error." Good intentions, the best of intentions, do not cover up or make amends for error. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not grace. That doesn't mean that there is not an opportunity to learn. But John is very clear. And by the way, John is the one that in this letter is a dividing line. He has no problem telling us a lot of either or statements throughout this letter. There exists, even now, a spirit of truth and a spirit of error. It exists within Christendom. It exists within the world. We live in that. We need to know what is truth. We need to know what is error. And there are many people and there are many voices, and maybe even among our own physical family, that would take our heart and would take our mind and lead us away from God. we need to test everything that we hear. I don't think I have to tell you how important these words would be in a 21st century where the majority of our information comes from a social media platform. We are in an information overload. We are trying to figure out everything that's going on. One of the frustrating things about the last 6 months of the COVID-19 pandemic is, what do we believe? Who do we believe? The same can be true and said of religious matters and other things. Test the spirits that you hear. There is a spirit of truth. He has spoken. He has had His word written down. And He continues to move. And notice what John says, and this is something that is so important. Going to verse 5, they are from the world, and they speak of the world, but we are from God. Whoever knows God listens to us. I think that puts Acts 2, verse 42 into a different light, doesn't it? That they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. If you know us and you know God, you'll listen to us. That's something that's very important. Matthew 18, and the lesson will be yours after this. These are the words of Jesus. But notice what He's going to say in Matthew 18, beginning with verse 7 through verse 9. And this is something very important in terms of this. Woe to the world for temptations to sin, for it is necessary that temptations come. But woe to the one by whom the temptation comes. If your hand or your foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to enter life crippled or lame than with 2 hands or 2 feet to be thrown into the eternal fire. If your eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to enter into life with 1 eye than with 2 eyes to be thrown into the hell of fire. The specific thing that I wanted to mention was verse 7. Woe to the world for temptations to sin. It's necessary that they come, but woe to the one by whom the temptation comes. In other words, woe to the one who provides that source. This false prophet and these dreamers of dreams in Deuteronomy 13, woe to those individuals who would give a message that would lead people away from God as opposed to God. Matthew 18 has as its context disciples, me, you, followers of Jesus. Woe to any of us if we lead people away from God by the words we speak and the doctrine we teach and the message that we proclaim. Woe to us if we lead people away from God with that temptation. Let's make sure. I know this isn't the feel-good lesson. I know this isn't one of those that we walk away and think that really gave me and reinvigorated my life, but it provides a good warning. Sometimes we need to renew our life by stop listening to the voices that would lead us away from God, and instead to the one voice, the Spirit of truth, that has spoken for all of eternity and has had everything written down for our learning and for our good. Maybe that's what needs to be done. Either way, I hope that it has been worth your time in joining us this morning. As always, I appreciate some of your time. I appreciate everything that you do for us and all the encouragement and the support you give. And if there's anything that was said this morning, any questions that you may have, please feel free to reach out. I'll be more than happy to talk with you about them and to engage in a discussion. Until next time, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you have a great day.